Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Capital City Baptist Church. Our reading is found in Daniel chapter 4, verses 34 and 35. At the end of the 7 years, the Bible says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked to heaven. I was given my mind back, and I blessed the high God, thanking and glorifying God who lives forever. His sovereign rule lasts and lasts. His kingdom never declines and falls. Life on this earth doesn't add up to much, but God's heavenly army keeps everything going. No one can interrupt his work. No one can call his rule into question. Here's a question for all of you. Do you like stories where the underdog comes out on top? I do. I enjoy watching events where the one or ones considered the least favored to win ends up winning. I likewise love watching events like sports events where defeat was imminent, and then out of nowhere, the one who was to be defeated ended up defeating his or her opponent. You might remember the movie Karate Kid with Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso, Pat Morita as Mr. Miyagi, and William Zabka as Johnny Lawrence. Now, the story goes like this, and I'm sure you remember, but Johnny Lawrence was a terror at school, using his size, his strength, and fighting abilities to bully the kids who could not defend themselves. He did the same, if you will remember, to Daniel LaRusso, except that Daniel decided that he didn't want to take it. And so he gets the help from Mr. Miyagi, who happens to be a war veteran and retired master in martial arts, who, by the way, he just lives a quiet life taking care of his old car collection when he becomes acquainted with Daniel. Anyway, using unconventional methods, Mr. Miyagi teaches Daniel and, teaches him martial arts. And at a tournament showdown, though Daniel's leg is broken by his opponent Johnny, no less, Daniel still manages to land a kick to Johnny's chin, which knocks him out, and Daniel emerges as the victor. Then there's another story that came out later. It was Rocky Balboa, who ends up fighting a boxing champion who is way out of Rocky's league. In the end, though, Rocky does not win the bout necessarily against Apollo Creed, but he does manage to win recognition and prestige as the formidable boxer, which of course ushers in Rocky II, Rocky III, and so forth. Okay, just one more, okay? Please indulge me for just a second. Star Wars. A New Hope is the name of the movie. Young Luke Skywalker comes out of obscurity where he was living on his uncle's farm to become a Jedi Master. But not before he, with the help of his unbeknownst to him at the time, twin sister Princess Leia, Han Solo, and Chewbacca, and the Rebel fleet, with a critical shot, Luke is able to destroy the Death Star. And so, of course, in all of these stories, they all have one thing in common. They're all underdogs who end up being victorious over the big dog. Such is the case in the reading today. The emperor of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, thought that he was invincible. He thought that his armies, which had conquered so many, his fortified walls, his wealth, and all that his might was, all that would be impossible to defeat. He thought that nothing could get to him. And so he went along, life as if he were some divine god. He got to the point where his arrogance was such that in a moment of utter arrogance and defiance to God, he gave himself credit for all that he had, in his mind, accomplished. He obviously had not learned his lesson or lessons when the three boys, the Jewish boys, refused to bow to his idol, and later feeling the humiliation of the fiery furnace that killed his mighty men, but had no effect on the boys. And he obviously had not learned his lesson when Daniel was the only one who could reveal his dream to him, something no other wise man, magician, astrologer in all of the kingdom could do. And he obviously had not learned his lesson when the four boys, when they first arrived as captives, were able to astound everyone with their intelligence that gave them when they refused the king's meat and instead ate vegetables and water. Four boys put an emperor in his place, an emperor who was feared by everyone except the true God, of course, the Ancient of Days, the one who had created him and everyone else on this earth. But sadly, the emperor had not learned his lesson. Though he had seen the hand of God 3 times, he was not ready to put away his own pride and arrogance. Nebuchadnezzar needed a personal intervention from the Lord. Because of his arrogance, he was made to live like a wild beast for 7 years. 7 years. Can you imagine that happening to you? No recognition of anything or anyone, living and eating in the field like a wild animal, the mighty and arrogant king, terrified of any human because of having the mindset of an animal. A man whose very name invoked fear and trembling now was fearful and hiding and trembling from everyone. But that's the only way that this man could learn the lesson that so many even still today do not get. That God is sovereign, that God is God, and there is no other. It strikes me that so many today are under the illusion that with the current technology, their modern thinking, their philosophies and social influence, they think that they could defy and or deny the God of heaven with their actions. They are so quick to jump on social media and sneer and ridicule anything that speaks about the Lord. Recently, with the latest insult to Christians, and I'm referring namely the deliberate mockery of the Lord's Last Supper during the opening ceremonies of the Olympics in Paris. Many notable and ordinary people, they voiced their disgust. But sadly, there were also an equal, if not greater amount of people who expressed hatred and hurled further insult to God and God-fearing people. The comments that came from these mockers caused great sadness to me. It is sad to think that these mockers may very well die in their sins and then spend the rest of eternity in the flames of hell for having rejected and blasphemed against the Lord. Make no mistake, though these mockers may feel they have the upper hand and think that they are as powerful as Nebuchadnezzar once felt, their day of reckoning will come. And so what is the challenge for all of us? Here it is. Let us not grow weary in loving and praying for our enemies and all who do not know the Lord. Last Sunday in Brother Dozier's Sunday school class, I expressed how frustrating it is to witness the passive resistance of family and friends towards the precepts and statutes of the Lord. It is mind-boggling that so many of these we love have either grown up in church or have at one time or many times heard the gospel. Their continuous resistance to surrender their lives to Him can be very discouraging to believers who are obedient and pray for them. But we cannot give up and we cannot stop praying. Our timing is never going to be God's timing. He knows all things. Let us take comfort that Daniel and his 3 friends never stopped being faithful in being the example Nebuchadnezzar needed, because in God's timing, their efforts paid off big. We may look like the underdog in this world of sin, But let us never surrender to the spirit of discouragement, but instead continue to be faithful in good works, honoring the Lord, being the example we need to be, and praying for and witnessing to the lost until He comes. Thank you so much for listening. May God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday if the Lord wills.